Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our series of interviews with eminent professors of accounting and finance in the UK. I'm Arman Ashraghi, Professor of Finance and Chair of CPAF, which is the professorial committee of the British Accounting and Finance Association. Today, I'm especially delighted to be joined by Professor Alex Edmans of London Business School, a globally influential scholar who needs no introduction. Alex's work bridges academic rigor and public relevance. He's renowned for his research on responsible business, corporate governance, long-term investing. He's the author of the acclaimed book Grow the Pie, among others. His latest book on the madness of markets is widely anticipated soon. Um, Alex is also the past editor of the Review of Finance and was instrumental, to say the least, in raising the Review of Finance to new heights. Alex is well versed in many areas of finance, but is particularly well known for his work in public policy, corporate purpose, research integrity, and behavioral finance. On a personal level, Alex is equally impressive, fluent in several languages, a running coach, nationally competitive chess player, and the list goes on. So, Alex, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. May I ask you to very briefly introduce yourself and share a bit about your academic journey, especially how your career has evolved in academia and thought leadership?
Well, first, thank you so much, Armin, for inviting me. It's great to be here. So, my first job out of university was not in academics. I was in investment banking at Morgan Stanley, which was a very good job in a number of ways. I got to work with really smart people, learn some important corporate decisions. But your focus was on one company's problems at one time. Whereas with academia, I view your impact as being much more broad and much more timeless. And so that has been something that I've tried to keep out throughout my career. So I started as an assistant professor at Wharton. And during that time, like any other assistant professor, you have to focus on publishing papers in academic journals to get tenure. And then almost immediately after getting tenure, I left to London Business School. Now, Wharton was a fantastic place to do research, and had my focus been just to keep publishing in top journals, I would have probably been best off just staying in the US, which is the centre of gravity in the profession. But for me to come back to my home country, the UK, and to be perhaps involved in policy and practice, so making sure that academic research, not just my own, but the research of an entire body of scholars, influences the way that companies make decisions and policymakers set laws, is something which is really important to me. And so while I have kept up the year publication, I've tried to broaden my contributions into journal editing. I'm currently dealing with the WFA program. I'm organising that this year, and also engagement with policymakers and practitioners.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex. That's a fascinating journey. Now, let me ask a few broader questions drawing on your career across academia, policy, practice. So, you've spoken and written extensively about purpose, both in business and in academia. In your view, what should the long-term purpose of an academic career be? How
I think the
has your own
purpose of
sense?
an academic is the creation and dissemination of knowledge. It is not publishing in journals or just getting more papers on the A list or the ABS list or whatever list you think about. Okay, that is part of it. But really, what we are doing is not just adding lines to a CV, but really we're trying to change the way people think and act. And obviously, there will be overlap between that. But I also think it's really important to make sure that we're publishing papers that are important. Now, you might be able to get a paper in a top journal if it makes a marginal contribution in a hot area, but I think the papers that make people really think might be ones which are quite new. So when I first wrote my paper on social responsibility and employee satisfaction back in 2011, that was way before ESG became popular. It was very difficult to publish that paper, but now it has much more impact than any of my other papers, perhaps because it was something which was unusual at the time. And then the dissemination of knowledge, the research process does not end with publication. I will still try to make sure that whatever papers I've written, they may have been published many years ago, They will be papers which are affecting the way that people think and act. I'm writing something for The Economist. They have their by invitation column, which is a huge pleasure to contribute to. That's based on my CEO pay research, which I did a long time ago, but I think it is still relevant today as it was in the past, linked to the timeless nature of academic research versus investment banking. And also, I think it's really important to disseminate the research of other people. So this is why it was nice to be an editor and help publish and shepherd papers to publication. It's nice to be WFA program chair and to perhaps take some speculative papers on the program. And then I try to use my LinkedIn platform and other platforms to mention other people's research, which is relevant and interesting. For example, there is a paper by Randuchin and co-authors that won the Dimensional Fund Advisors Prize. I thought it's a great paper. I advertise it on my LinkedIn, and then other people who might not have known it are now drawn to it.
Thank you, Alex. In fact, as you know well, many early researchers look to your work, not just for content, but for inspiration. So what advice do you have specifically for early career academics who are trying to navigate this balance between publishing, teaching, and making an impact beyond the normal academic tasks?
Now, there are many people who say, well, as a junior professor, just focus on publishing papers in A journals. And then afterwards, when you're a full professor, then you can think about impact and service. But I don't really buy that. I don't think you can completely change as a person as soon as you get tenure. It's just like if someone says, oh, I'm not going to spend any time with my children. I want to make partner of a law firm. And then after I've made partner of a law firm, then I'm now going to start being nice to my children. We live one life and it's a great life that we get to lead. And I think we should do things that we feel passionate about. So the papers that I write, are they the ones that spark joy? Are the ones that when I come to work in the morning, I am really excited about working on this paper? And hopefully there will be an overlap between that and what's publishable. But I don't try to write a paper just because I think, oh, it's in a hot topic and this
Yeah.
editor was just now appointed to this journal and their taste is to accept papers in this field. And I think the idea of having broad impact and contributing in terms of service might well pay back in ways that you don't think. So I spent a lot of time trying to be a good referee when I was junior. I never knew that the Review of Financial Studies would suddenly come up with a Distinguished Referee Award, and I won that in the first year that it was launched. And I was made an associate editor in my fourth year as an assistant professor, and I never thought that that would be possible. And this is the difference between, I think, a purposeful finance professor,
Mhm.
where you do things not expecting anything in return, but unexpectedly you will benefit down the line, and a strategic finance professor, where you only do things where you think the NPV is positive. And in a world where there's a lot of uncertainty, it's really difficult to make decisions based on NPV calculations. So the idea of how much can I contribute to this profession, how much can I contribute to society, I don't think it's an unrealistic way to lead your life and to have a fulfilling as well as a successful career.
Thank you, Alex. I couldn't agree more. And you're a very impressive case for the case you argue. Very impressive example. So now if you could focus briefly on the other end of the spectrum, how do you personally see the responsibilities of a full professor today? Not just in research output, but in mentoring, leadership, and the broader contributions to the society.
So what I think is fantastic about the job is that this career allows you to take whatever path that you want to. And I've taken one path, and I really don't want people to think that's the only path to take. So there's some people who get made full professor, and they just focus on research and scholarship
Mm.
because they are top-notch researchers. So one of my co-authors, Xavier Gabex, he's an amazing scholar. His work is now going in very different directions. It was based on power laws in the early part of his career, then CEO pay. Now he's looking at granular instrumental variables, and somebody like that, I think he best serves society by doing top-notch research. There are others who are better in terms of academic leadership, administration, maybe becoming department chair, maybe serving as president of a society like you are doing. And there's others who will do things which are more outward facing. So for me, given my background with practitioners and given I like communicating complex concepts into simple language, I choose to do things with policymakers and practitioners in the media. Something like LinkedIn, I don't get paid for the amount of posts that I do. I don't get any credit with the London Business School, but it does give me satisfaction that if I was to mention somebody's paper, then my post might get maybe 500 likes and the downloads of that paper might go up by a couple of hundred. And it's nice that if I find a paper interesting and I'd love to share it with with practitioners in general, they might take note, and it might mean that a paper which somebody spent 2 years writing has more impact than it might have done otherwise.
Absolutely, absolutely, Alex. Now, staying on with the theme of research, you've been quite vocal publicly about misreading research findings, misrepresenting them, issues like publication biases, research integrity, p-hacking. So my question is, what habits or standards do you believe researchers should infuse themselves with in order to raise the credibility and impact of their academic work?
So I'm really glad that you brought this up, Arman. So you're absolutely right. I have been quite critical about sloppy research, but I've tried to do that to the extent possible, not about academic research. So about practitioner research. So these might be articles by McKinsey or BlackRock, where people
Mm,
are very eager to accept these findings just because they want them to be true. And I wanted to say, well, there's a big difference between practitioner research and academic research. Peer review is very important. We do need to make sure that these papers are checked and vetted. And why I typically don't criticize academic research is we already have an academic process. You might be invited to be a discussant, you might be invited to be a referee, and maybe I don't get invited, but that's fine. That's just how the cookie crumbles. I know that Jonathan Burke, for example, is coming up with something called Discourse, which is a platform where anybody can comment on any paper. And I try not to do anything outside of this because it is within the system. I only remember myself commenting once on a case in which it was an academic. Why? Because this was somebody whose research had been found to be inaccurate. There was a paper published by another scholar showing that research did not hold water, and yet this scholar was claiming still in Harvard Business Review that it was a landmark paper. And I thought that was a misrepresenting his research, given that readers of the Harvard Business Review might not have known about this replication paper. They might have acted on the basis on the findings of that research. I felt it was my responsibility to bring that to people's attention. So why am I doing this? Is that I love to be critical? No, it's because I believe so much in academic research. I want to stand up for academia as a profession, that I want to say there's a big difference between the papers that you might write or the papers that any other people or listening to this interview might write, and a McKinsey study which might be done for marketing purposes. I want to say, well, there is a really good reason why we want to look at something which is academic. And I do think then to the second part of your question, what do we have responsibility as academics to do is not to oversell our papers. If indeed a paper has been shown to be inaccurate, don't come up in the Harvard Business Review and say that your paper was a landmark seminal paper. If you give a TEDx talk, don't give a claim it was a TED talk. I saw recently a person claimed to have spoken at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He spoke at a Davos side event outside of the World Economic Forum. It just happened to be in the
yes.
same location. I think these things are problematic, and maybe you can fool some people, but I think we as a profession, if indeed what we have over the McKinseys of this world is accuracy and trust, I think that's something that we can lose very quickly if we are fast and loose with how we present our research.
Again, absolutely. This is so important for our listeners. There's so much more we can talk about, Alex, but in the interest of time, let me draw to a close by asking you to say a word about your upcoming book, The Madness of Markets, which explores market behavior and speculative episodes. Can you can you tell our listeners a little bit about what to expect in this book?
Thanks, Simon, and I really appreciate you asking this question because it speaks to a broader meta issue. So, if you think about other fields within business schools, to be at the pinnacle of the profession is to write a book because this shows how you impact the real world. Let's say Carol Dweck with her book on mindset, or maybe Katie Milkman with How to Change, Angela Duckworth with her book
Mm,
Grit, Adam Grant and his books. Those are ones where you are seen as an authority, you influence other people. Why is it that in accounting and finance, to be the pinnacle of your profession is to
Mm.
write something in the Handbook of Economic and of Finance or in the Journal of Economic Literature to write a review chapter? Now, I've written many review chapters, so I've got nothing against them. But why is that we see the leaders of the profession as just people who are inward facing? In fact, to write a book, it might count negatively. People think, well, you're dumbing down your research. Your research must be so simple if it can be listened to by the unwashed masses. And I think this is hugely problematic. I just got back from the AFAs in Philadelphia. Wharton was my prior school, and I can reel off probably 10 people outside of finance who've all published books. And then who is the most famous person within the finance department at Wharton among, say, the real world? Jeremy Siegel. And he's somebody who hasn't published something in academia for 30 years. Perhaps one of the most influential people in finance in the real world is Aswath Damodaran, who defines himself in opposition to academia. If you go to this website, he says, I'm not a standard academic. And this is sad. This is sad. All of the others, like Duckworth and Milkman, they are still academics. Why is it that in our field, we are so dismissive of people who write books or who have public impact that the ones that do so decide to have to remove themselves from the profession? So what I want to do is write books which are based in academic research. Again, not just my own, but other people's. My first book, Grow the Pie, was about the research on sustainability that many people have done. Then with May Contain Lies, I try to highlight the importance of academic research in general. And then this new book, The Madness of Markets, it's loosely speaking a bit like a Freakonomics, but for finance. It's about behavioral finance of the research from some of our top scholars in the profession. So let's say Lauren Cohen or Sam Hartzmark, David Solomon, Kelly Shue, Toby Moskowitz, Lassie Peterson, some of this really cool research, which I think is as cool as the sumo wrestling studies in Freakonomics. And I want to expose this to a broader audience. So it's the most fun book that I've ever written.
Oh,
When
wow.
I would write it, it's the most, I had so much fun putting pen to paper. And not because of me, it's because of the research that I was covering was so great. And I just can't wait for this to be out for a broader audience.
Fantastic. And I mean, neither can I wait because it's, again, I'm a big fan of your own research, and I'm sure your choice of the research that you've decided to showcase in this paper clearly is very compelling. So, Professor Alex Edmans, thank you so much on behalf of the British Accounting and Finance Association and myself for such thoughtful, energizing insights. Your very unique combination of both intellectual rigor and public engagement is truly inspiring to all of us. I know many of our listeners, especially early career academics, will find great value in your reflections today. So once again, thank you for your time and very best wishes for your future endeavors.
Thanks so much, Alan. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.